So in this video, we're going to be breaking down my plus 10. This is actually from last week, so this is when you still had to gobble up the orbs that were traveling towards the mobs. This was actually, I think, done on like Tuesday, so start of the week. I think I was still like 619 or so. This is a full pug group as well. My talents will also be down below. There's nothing too notable that I'm running, maybe outside of like things like light brewing, but generally when I'm playing with pugs, I like to try to build out my character to be a little bit more tanky in terms of talents and gear, so like defensive trinkets if possible. Because generally what I'm finding in these keys, especially like 10 and up, 10s and 11s and even 12s, is that if you're clean in the run and you don't have any catastrophic wipes or deaths, generally you'll time the key. Obviously there's caveats of like making the damage check. You can't bring like undergear people in, but anyways, jumping into the run, we are doing a pretty large first pull. The one thing that we do want to keep in mind is that the Gatekeeper does have a couple of casts with Necrotic Bolt that will put a healing absorb on people, and the Wrath of Zul'Ramis is going to do a ton of AoE damage here. We are going to be committing Lust and all of our cooldowns to this first pull, and then the only other thing that we're looking out for is the Corpse Harvester. It's marked with Star currently. Generally, you only need one melee kick per. So what I normally do is I set this focus and I just make sure I'm kicking the drain fluids so DPS can focus on just doing as much damage as possible. This pull will go down pretty easily. It does take all of our healing cooldowns and all of our offensive cooldowns, but I think it's worth it in the overall grand scheme of things because the next couple of pulls are going to be pretty tame overall. That last pull, I also didn't really talk about it, but I'm going to open up with Dampen Harm. Once Dampen Harm fades, I'm going to a Celestial Brew into a Black Ox Brew, followed by Fortifying Brew later on. I believe in this run I was running the Determination node for Fortifying Brew, which increases stagger effectiveness as well, so it makes Fortifying Brew a little bit better of a cooldown than it normally is at a baseline value. But anyways, this pull does have 2 kick requirements. It's both harvesters instead of just one, so double drain fluids. Just make sure this is not getting off, and if you run out of kicks and it does go off, try to stun it or knock it whenever they do end up getting low. Right here, I notice that I'm dipping a little low. We're getting these blade bags to die, and I just want to roll away, get a Ring of Peace to stop some of that incoming melee damage so I don't end up perishing, because I did commit most of my defensive cooldowns to the first pull, and I see that our healer is also dry. My Celestial Brew is up with decent stacks. I also have Weapons of Order. Dampen Harm is going to be even 20, and Black Ox Brew is available. So we're going to go actually Center Pack now. Center Pack has one Harvester that we need to keep track of. It's marked with orange, so I do have it set focus so I can make sure I'm getting kick on trade fluids. I am opening basically with one Celestial Brew into a Black Ox Brew, and Weapons of Order was available as well. So it's going to give me a little bit of tankiness. I see these soldiers are patrolling in. We're going to make sure we're targeting them, getting a keg smash, and getting threat. I'm going to be dipping a little low here. I will want to kite if it ever comes down to it. Again, I'm going to chain dampen as soon as it becomes available. While I am using it low, I'm using it essentially on cooldown. I'm trying to give myself a little bit of time. That's why you're seeing me kind of stagger, no pun intended, a little bit to the left to break up melee swings from these mobs, because while monks are fairly efficient against just melee hits because of our stagger mechanic, when you're low on health, it's a little bit dangerous still, especially with high ticks of stagger. Anyways, we're going to be gobbling up these orbs that are coming in to get a Mastery and Leech buff. With Brewmasters dealing a fair bit of damage, the Leech buff is actually kind of nice, and Mastery is just a flat attack power gain, and it's an amplification on our Celestial Brew. So keep that in mind. And then, unfortunately, my Flurry Strikes procced before I even got to the mob, so I lost out on a good bit of damage there, but we're opening this up with a good stack of dodge from Shado-pan. And then, yeah, double Harvester again. So making sure we're kicking Star and Orange. Generally speaking, you only need one melee kick for these, so just having one person watch each. Generally as the tank, I like to watch Star, and DPS should generally watch Orange. I do have an auto marker, Weak Aura. It's available in my Discord. You can also just go to Wago and type in like Mythic plus auto marker and it should pop up. The reason we do this pack is because we wanted time for cooldowns to come up if people needed. I'm not tracking Wings. Pillar of Frost is still on CD, and it looks like the Arcane Mage actually used cooldowns on that last pull. So we're going to be pretty dry here. This is a scary frontal. It will kill you if you are not topped or you don't use a defensive, so make sure you're doing that. The only thing I think the Shaman could have done there is link on himself for the 10% DR. He could have, technically the mage should have just mass barrier there as well. That probably could have kept him alive, but it's fine. When you're in a pug, those kind of things you don't really think about. Generally what I find is that you tend to think a little bit more selfishly in pugs, myself included, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but to become a better player, you want to start thinking about others in your entire group during the course of the run. In the terms of the tank, like that's where you're positioned, where mobs are, what kind of kicks you're looking out for. Those types of things are kind of vital. And if, a good mage, and not to say that this mage didn't do well, but noticing that the Astral Shift wasn't available from the Shaman, and then popping that mass barrier for that first frontal could have kept him alive. Anyways, we cleared the stage too because it just gives us more room. Now, while we did clear a Gatekeeper and the center pack, we actually have a ton of room to work with, so I'm not really worried about it. But playing the stage gives this like weird sense of like where to go. It kind of confines you to a smaller arena space to start, so people are a little bit more conservative with what space they have, and then all of a sudden you come down here and it's like, oh, we have the whole room to work with. Generally, you want to aim the wretch away towards the old poop that's on the ground, and then try to stack up the carrion worms and kill them. A little unknown fact I don't think a lot of people realize is that if these worms bite or hit a player 5 times, they actually become immune to CC, and they will blow up, applying like a really nasty dot that will pretty much kill your group. So you never want to let those carrion worms just start casting on people. Try to knock them away, or at least keep them stunned and kill them off as fast as possible. Outside of that, Bladebone is really just a triage fight where you need to kill him before he kills you or you run out of space. And that's why I like clearing the whole room. Also, Necrotic Wake got this weird treatment where they're like, hey, we're going to increase the percentage where you have to pretty much pull everything in this place. And that has made this a little bit worse, but the benefit in this case is that we have almost this entire room to work with now compared to what we used to do back in Shadowlands, which is like pull as little as possible in this room because you got almost all your trash later on in the dungeon. Anyways, we're going to be heading up to the second area now, and we have had 1 death on our Shaman. So first I'm going to kick the Sorcerer, and then I'm going to roll into this Necrotic Necromancer pack. This pack is pretty chill. The only thing you have to watch out for is the Shadow Well, which is casted by the Sorcerer, which is that first mob that I kicked and decided to pull in here. That Shadow Well will cause problems later on in the dungeon, and I see a lot of tanks not pay attention to it, and it is often the reason you die on these pulls. Outside of the Necrotic Bolts, which also apply a Healing Absorb, as long as you're kicking those things, things end up being fine, but what ends up happening is, if you're not paying attention to the Shadow Well cast, and you stand in it even for a global, what ends up happening is sometimes you're going to have a reactionary cast to a heal, whether it's things like Lay on Hands, or a Health Pot, or Expel Harm, or Impending Victory, or whatever it might be, and that will immediately get healed by the Shadow Well. And I have failed plenty of keys, and I've learned my lesson, so I tend to always respect the Shadow Well. Now, right here too, this is important for melee to know, because it's actually, you're going to see an example of it in a second. Because of the Shadow Well, the tank is going to be forced to move in this instance. So one just came out, so I strafed off to the right, and then there's going to be another one that's going to come out that's just going to have me kind of strafing back to the left. And what happens there is the tank has to move out of the well, so the melee should be behind the Marauder at all times. There's no reason to be in front of the mobs, next to the mobs, whatever, because if the tank ends up having to move because of the Shadow Well, you're going to get killed by the cleave. Now, could I have been better with my positioning there? Of course. I think I kind of strafed a little bit too far to the left and ended up killing our Paladin, but the Paladin shouldn't have been there in the first place. So that's kind of the argument there. Outside of that, Bone Mender, just kick the Bone Mend, Necrotic Bolt, kick the Necrotic Bolt, pretty easy. I generally like to watch for myself this rasping scream from these Marauders, because as a tank, if I get feared, not only am I CC'd and I can't do anything, but I'm going to automatically I'm going to run away from the mobs directly, and then the mobs are going to be chasing me, and the mobs will be behind me, hitting me, making me I can't dodge, right? So you want to be a little bit careful of that scream. This next pack we're going to just roll into, and we're going to try to do our best to group them up. Luckily, we have A-Bomb Limb. A couple of Necrotic Bolts hit me and connected, so I'm going to be taking a lot of damage here. There isn't much you can do as a Brewmaster Monk. Like, Diffuse Magic is fine. You can always Celestial Brew to keep yourself alive, but eventually the damage itself will be overwhelming. Now, one thing I did here, though, is I committed one of the Anima Orbs I picked up earlier. There's 3 in this dungeon. What it does is it does a good bit of AoE pulsing damage. It's this orb here that you're going to see me pick up. I'm going to hold on to this one, though. But what it does is it also AoE silences everything. So that's a bad play on the mage's part, actually. I think he blinked into one of those swirls, the Grim Fate that was on the ground. Obviously don't do that, but that's all right. It's going to be a quick run back. He probably shouldn't have released, though. Or the Death Burst, that's what I meant to say. Narzuto is also interesting because he has this absorb shield on him. It's not even an absorb, it's like a debuff where it makes him immune to physical damage. So it makes a comp like this a little weird. Now, we have a lot of magical damage going on, but we do have some physical hits, like things like melee swings, and as well as like most of my kit. And then something else that I just did is I picked up one of these shields. This shield, I think, is a 25% AoE DR or 50% AoE DR. Basically, it gives you something to use for a scary pull or just for some scary tank busters, which we have a plenty coming up. So right here, I'm going to be kicking Star. You see that I have it set focused. And then I need someone else watching orange, basically, for the fear. So you just assign typically another melee for that fear, and it should get kicked. It looks like our paladin kicked that one, but I know that the sphere ends up going off, which is fine. And then also these mages cast this volley, this frostbolt volley. Try to do your best to stop it. It does a lot of AoE damage, and it generally, in hierarchies, it will kill you. But generally, the worst part about it is actually going to be like if it overlaps with a necrotic bolt, because your health will get really low. The healer's trying to get you out of that absorb shield, and then it finishes you off. And then right here, I'm committing that 25% shield to myself. You can see this kind of like bluish circle around me. Now here's where the fear goes off. Our mage was supposed to kick it. I think he said he was going to get it before the pull. But I think he messed up on his shifting power or something like that here. Honestly, it should have just been another melee. Like, we had 4 kicks there. I was holding mine for Star, but with the fear going off, it just ended up, running in fear. And then it was actually a really good lay on hands play from our paladin. He actually ended up not only removing the necrotic bolt shield, but basically topping my health pool. If I died there, that pull could have been a wipe. So it's a good thing we were able to do that. Necromancer's priority here. All of these summoned mobs, basically everything around these necromancers, cannot be killed. The necromancer just pulses an aura that keeps them pretty much topped. Now, we do almost end up killing one of these mages, but it's very difficult. You can see their health almost returning to 100% immediately. So you definitely need to be very careful here. So we're trying to focus Skull and stopping any volleys we can. If I need to, I can use one of this orb that I have, my extra action button. But I prefer to use that on one of these next pulls because there's a lot of bolts and stuff. This pull's pretty chill, and we're doing this pull to unlock our third and final anima orb, or anima sphere, whatever it's called, that I'm going to end up trying to use ideally up in the Necropolis. You can always use it on second boss. If there's ever a point on second boss where you don't have CC, or mobs are free casting and the boss is just spamming Necrotic Bolt because no one's kicking, it's not bad to use it on an ad set on boss, but it can definitely be more valuable on trash pulls. So here we are just kind of gathering orbs again. I haven't really talked about defensives too much. Basically, I'm using my defensives on cooldown. These pulls are pretty scary, especially when you're playing with a healer who doesn't really have an external. Like, we have a Rat Paladin who can hand of sack, but the Shaman doesn't really have a DR for you. Shadow comes down, trying to get the kick. I end up getting feared again. We had 4 kicks there. I don't know why people aren't kicking the fear. Luckily, we do have Tremor Totem as well, but that's just my fault. Normally what I do is I set focus, so if you maybe rewind a little bit, you'll see that I realize that the fear is going off and I try to move back in for a kick and then I end up not getting it. So ends up being fine. This time around, we end up getting the kick and we're chilling. Once some of these other mobs die, we're going to roll into the next pack. Interesting enough, the Menders, the Bone Menders, they do a cast called Final Bargain. And what this is, it'll pretty much full heal a mob, but then it kills them over 8 seconds. So yes, you could stop the cast, but at the same time, if you let it go off, the mob's going to end up dying anyway, so it's not a big deal. All right, now we're just opening these orbs. These mobs are pretty easy to tank together. They don't do a ton of damage to you. The monstrosity does have a tank buster, but the Marauder just has a frontal, and you're generally going to be rolling out for it anyway, so as long as melee aren't in front of you, you're fine. And then dodge frigid spikes. And that's it. Yeah, nothing really to do here. This guy's pretty easy. I like playing him because he is worth a lot of percent. You can see here he's worth like 6. So if you can try to even pull him onto another pack, or even chaining him earlier than I did there, you can actually, it's actually pretty efficient. So I forgot that we didn't pick up this anima sphere. Also, I didn't use mine till late. So I've decided to come back and pick it up while boss RP starts. Now, it should have just finished, or maybe someone triggered it earlier. I can't remember, but I don't mind waiting here. It's not a big time loss, and it gives the healer like time to get mana. I put down a world marker because I am going to be pulling the boss back to this corner. The reason why is because, similar to the Xal'atath orbs, this boss can only spawn ads around him, but will never spawn them outside of the room or up against a wall. So what you could do is you could just do this, and when he's in the corner, you pretty much force him to stack at least 3 of the mobs underneath, and then all you have to do is CC out one of the mobs or more. If you have enough control, like things like Frozen Trap or Paralysis, you can... Oh, and we end up getting a Death Grip on him for some reason. You can just leave these mobs out, and as long as they're CC'd, they won't blow up, and they won't deal damage to you. So this final Harvest Cast is scary, because if there are any mobs left alive, I can't remember if it does burst damage or if it applies a nasty dot, but it's almost going to be a wipe. So there's a couple ways you can counter this. You can either put out a hard CC, something like a Paralysis, for example, or you could do a soft CC right before the cast finishes with things like a Leg Sweep. Now, unfortunately, my keg actually just broke that guy out, which was unfortunate. I kind of watched that in slow motion. Luckily, we do have a Death Knight who's able to grip a lot of mobs in, and things like Spirit Link will keep us nice and healthy through this. The big thing here for the tank is to kick the Necrotic Bolt if possible, because the Necrotic Bolt won't just wreck you, it'll also target random players. It does a ton of damage, it just did half the Paladin's health, and it puts a healing absorb. So when this starts to overlap with maybe early melee swings from the ads, or a Frostbolt volley, or just a Frostbolt, it could pretty much be lethal. And we're going to see that actually a little bit later. I think our mage ends up going down. But ideally you try to CC one, if not both mages out, and trying to get the other mobs in. And we can do that with things like Ring of Peace. So I'm trying to scan here for a far mob. I only see the mage that's close, but what ends up happening is my mage is getting meleeed by the warrior, as well as we kick the mage, so the mage meleeed as well. I'm trying to pick up these orbs to extend our buff for our leech, and then our shaman got hit by a Necrotic Bolt, so I used Vivify on him to get him hopefully quickly at least the absorb off, and that was pretty much it. And then I'm gonna extend our buff once more. So now our mage can just technically release, and we're gonna be heading up to the Necropolis. And notice this is I still have my Animosphere orb. This is gonna be very useful because this means I can do a triple pull. As long as we have CDs, I see Breath of Sintergrosa, I see Pillar coming up, I see Arcane Mage in 30 seconds. Now, we are waiting for this far patrol on my right to reach the star marker before we pull. So this is about a 30-second wait, and this patrol starts, patrolling when you kill the second boss. So this timer is almost going to always be consistent whenever you do this dungeon if you're going to be doing this strat. So cooldowns are up in 10. Basically, I need someone to watch one collector. I'm going to set focus to the other, so we're watching the Gore Splatter. Ox Statue comes down early to absorb some of the early melees. We're going to go right in. I'm going to pop basically all of my damage CDs. We got Exploding Keg, so now I'm dodging. We get a kick on the Gore Splatter, and now that our kicks are expended, I'm now going to commit the Animosphere to this pull to keep everything else silenced and to essentially do enough damage to finish off all the packs. You can see that the Gore Splatter once again got kicked by the orb. We didn't have a kick available there, but that Animosphere orb is very, very strong for pulls like this, especially in pugs, because it kicks for you. We might as well just call it Bran Bronzebeard. Holy cow, that wasn't even English. Bran Bronzebeard. There we go. The only thing to be careful about here is this Tenderize cast that makes you take more physical damage, so trying to chain this pull is not a great idea, or if the pull lives too long, you're eventually going to perish, so kiting is probably your best bet. The Tenderize itself doesn't do a lot of damage, but it makes you take more physical damage, so this Mutilate, as you can see, does a lot. And now we're going to be continuing this dungeon just like normal, and we're marking the collector to make sure we're getting the Gore Splatter done. And then one last thing to note is these crafters and or collectors or whoever will throw these, they do this throw cleaver cast with the red arrow on the ground. This does damage to anyone standing in it or anything standing in it. So you can actually use it to damage mobs. So what we're going to do is we're going to aim it up, and then you can see it's going to do a, once it goes off, it does a ton of damage to this creation. So the creation went from 36% down to 5%, which is massive. So we're going to be utilizing that a few more times. Here's another crafter. I'm going to get him up quickly. Once the cast starts, I'm going to knock him. He's going to just try to do the cast again. The shaman is going to get into position, but unfortunately threat is being a little weird here. I see Gore Splatter. I'm going to commit the leg sweep because I haven't had time to set focus yet. I'm going to do that now. And now we're just kind of chilling. This pull doesn't do too much damage to us. We're mostly worried about the Gore Splatter and the drain fluids on our enemies. I see the orbs going in. I try to roll through. I got hit by that spine crack though. Ideally that you don't want that to happen, but I just was able to use the defensive, or Slusher Brew specifically. And now it's all kind of piled up. We're able to use this throw cleaver to start kind of nuking down the mobs. Ideally, if you can keep it alive, or maybe even not group it up at all and leave it outside, It'll do a lot of damage as long as you're in a coordinated group, but in a pug, sometimes it's better just to get things stacked and killed, because min-maxing these things without comms is definitely a lot harder to do. And that's it. Spine Crush, just run out. It does physical damage, so a tank can live it. You could technically just kind of stand in it, but you don't want to risk it when you're taking a lot of different damage instances in this place. All right, so here's a little trick. Stand on the right-hand side and spam taunt the guy who spawns on the left facing the stage, and it'll actually stack them up nice and easy to allow you to get early cleave and to allow people to get quicker stacked for these throw cleavers to do big damage. Look, they're already at 70% health, very good. And then they're also stacked in the Death and Decay. The Arcane Mage can start pumping. They're both in the Acid Rain. When you don't taunt them right away, they'll start their throw cleaver cast standing the full like 25-30 yards apart, meaning that just cleave isn't effective. And sometimes it takes a longer time for players to react, which is not good. So here comes out another throw cleaver. It kills the other guy, and then the assistant is the only one that's left, or the separation assistant, and we're just going to finish him off nice and quick. So right here, I'm putting down an Ox statue to help with some early threat here. Threat has been an issue for Brewmaster monks. There's supposedly a theory going around that it's actually the free resets of Keg Smash that we're getting from our tier sets. I believe it's some kind of scaling with Shado-pan, but I can't confirm or deny either one. But the Black Ox statue allows me to AoE taunt on 8-second cooldown, which is very nice. So I prefer using it. It also can absorb some melee swings early on in a pull. So all around, just pretty much actually a pretty good choice. I think it's a little sleeper. And we're just essentially nuking down these mobs. Focus Gore Grind if possible, because he does this Tenderize cast, which makes the tank take more damage. The Mutilate is really the scary one when it starts to overlap with these different Tenderize casts, or stacks, I should say. And then the bits just will be annoying and hit you in the face. So the scariest part for the tank in this next pull is when you chain with Tenderize, the start of the next pull can be scary if it refreshes right when you pull. Now, luckily for us, this guy's going to die before he refreshes that 4-stack, so I don't have any stacks. But there are times where that's not the case because of the kill timing. And if that's the case and you roll into this pack and these guys come out, sometimes their first melee swings do a little too much damage. One other thing about this pack that I don't think a lot of people know, but I'll probably do a little short on it or something like that. But so the Spew Disease that's on the ground is the same spell ID as the aura that he gives off. So if you're already in melee, the damage from the poop on the ground doesn't exist. So you can realistically just stand in it. Now you can see me moving out because every DPS I play with, but look, I'm moving into it and it's not doing any more damage to me. It is the same exact spell ID as the aura that he's giving off, the little debuff that you can see underneath his frame. So melee DPS or range, if you happen to be playing in melee, you're going to be taking the damage anyways. Now, of course, range can stand further back and avoid taking damage at all to reduce the healing that's required, but melee don't ever need to be worried. You're going to be taking damage during this pull regardless, so just stand in it if you must. All right, so this is what we're going to do. I'm asking them if they want to wait for Lust or if we want to just rip it, because we've been pretty fast, but we have plenty of time. We have full percent, as you can see. We have 2 bosses left and about 8 minutes remaining. What we're going to end up doing is we're going to actually just end up pulling this guy. It looks like we have 1 spear, 2 spears, I see. So we're going to be using double spear on this guy. You can stack them to make the boss do even more damage. We're going to do this without Lust, though. We're going to be doing this natty. When the meat hook goes out, you need to move. You can't be standing basically I just say stand behind him. Don't even move away if you need to. As a tank, right when he lands, you taunt. You gotta taunt, because people are going to be whipping out their spears. People are going to be blowing all their CDs. And if they happen to melee one of your buddies, it's going to go to shit really quick. Morbid Fixation comes out. You want to be close so he gets gripped. Luckily, and maybe unluckily, we did cleave so hard we ended up killing the guy, so we're not going to get an instant grip to get him back off the stage, but we will be able to get him down relatively quickly, and this is honestly the safer method to doing this boss. They have nerfed him a few times since, week 1, but at this point, just play it safe if you have this much time left. I'm going to get him in position, the world marker's down so people know where to go. You could try to bait swirls away if you want to, but it's not that big of a deal. We're going to pretty much kill him on this next rotation. Now, one thing I will say, though, about his little fixation that he does, not only can you just hook him out of it, we do have a backup if we had Bop available. We don't though. Our Paladin used it earlier on one of the trash pulls. But Bop is really good. You could also Shadow Meld and Feign it once it starts the actual fixation. If you do it early, I think he just recasts it, which can actually mess up spell queuing. But right now we're just essentially trying to kill him before he jumps back up in, I think he jumps up in like 4 seconds. So he's going to do this last hook. We would ideally aim this at stage, but Touch of Death comes in clutch there, finishing off the boss before he leaves. And we have now about 6 minutes, just shy of 6 minutes, going into the final boss with Lust. Now the final boss is interesting. The tank doesn't really do that much. I mean, this guy just kind of slaps the tank always, but the main core mechanic of this fight is the exile, and the tank will never go down. It's only ever DPS. But basically, I like to pull him off to the left-hand side, or right-hand side, whichever way you want to go. Pull him to either the left or right-hand side. And the reason why you do that is because players who go and get exiled will land, I guess, to the east and west of the platform, and then they can easily get access to the corners without having the boss right on top of them, meaning that they're not going to ideally get hit by swirls or anything like that. Also, the Xal'atath affix, this will force orbs to spawn basically on 180 degrees behind him, the way that he's facing, well, now he's facing around, but basically 180 degrees behind him instead of being all around him at a 360 degree radius, or whatever you want to call it, circumference. And then we're just dodging squirrels. I like to always go to the left. Ideally, DPS could just stack up and move as a group as long as you're not getting clipped by one. One will kill you anyways, so if you don't, you just stack up and it's fine. I don't think we do that in this key. Generally, I'll do it when I'm playing with people that I know, basically melee stack right when Comet Storm's coming out, and then you all move to the left. No one loses downtime. No one accidentally runs into each other's swirls because you're all going different directions. For a tank, use your defensives aggressively here. When he's spamming his ice shards, I believe the pattern is he'll do 3 in a row, then he'll do his frozen binds, then he'll do 4 in a row, and then he'll do his root. It might be flopped from that, but basically you have to always be thinking in 3s and 4s. As you're getting hit, you're like, okay, I took 1, I'm at 80% health still. I took 2, I'm at 60% health. Okay, I can live a third. Or you might be like, oh, okay, I'm at 60. Oh, I'm at 30. I need to pop something here to survive the last hit. But then you have a little bit of time to top yourself. So here's 1 frigid shard or icy shard. Here's 2, and then it should be a third. And then it goes into frozen binds. Or no, here's the 4th. So 4th into frozen binds. And then the next set should be a little bit easier. And then you do get a little bit of downtime whenever he does this Aegis. When he does the Aegis, he's kind of just like vibing. Or the swirls, I should say. Sorry, the Aegis is when he's pulsing the AoE damage. And that's pretty much it. So Exile is going to come out. You do get a little bit of breathing room. I'm trying to, generate enough for a big Celestia brew for, future shards. I'm going to pop it here because I saw that the one chunked me down 30%. It does this weird thing where it splits magic. If I'm not mistaken, it does physical and nature damage or frost damage. So it does like a combination of both. This is where things get scary when you have a lot of people in melee, a lot of swirls going on. It's a good link, but not very efficient on swirls because no one's in it. But it was a good thought. I do still have Fort Brew. I'm expel harm. I have access to instant vivifies if I really want to, but I'm trying to push out damage. And with about 3 minutes remaining, we time the key. So that's pretty much Necrotic Wake. Very good run. It's just a 10. I know a 10 for a lot of people, it's what you strive to get to. For me personally, I plan on going much higher than 10s, but I thought this was a pretty good run, especially in a full pug group with no comms. I think understanding what things do and how to use your defensives and why I'm pulling the way that I do is hopefully makes sense. Let me know what you guys think down below or if you have any questions. Of course, good luck if you do attempt a Necrotic Wake in the near future, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.